Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Roy's Tie-Dye Sci-Fi Corner, episode number 167, Back to the Future, the classic 1985 film starring Michael J. Fox, Leah Thompson,
Christopher Lloyd,
and Crispin
Crispin
Glover.
Glover.
Doing the dramatic pause. With me tonight, it's been that kind of a week, folks. With me tonight to discuss this classic film back from the 1980s is my friend, my co-host, the one and only, Mr. Ross Amico. Ross,
Baseball bat. Hi, Roy.
How are you, Ross?
All right, how you doing?
I'm all right.
Okay.
Now that we got the pleasantries out of the way.
Let's get this show on the road.
Yeah, let's get going. Hey, I want to welcome our viewers out there, Ross. We got Urko 2005. Please identify yourself. I am not sure who that is, but Urko is actually joining us on YouTube. So thank you for viewing us on YouTube. Randy Lee is out there. He's saying, I think I see the strategy here. Roy is going to go back in time and get the shows to start on time.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Yeah. Find a time traveling DeLorean.
I also see Colin Corliss is out there. Hey, Colin. And hey, Mary Beth is joining us. Welcome, Mary Beth. Mary Beth is joining us from Massachusetts, and she is also joining us on YouTube. Welcome, Mary Beth. Good to see you out there. And also, I see Christian is joining us from Canada. Welcome, Christian. Good to see you there. And The Hague is in the house. Welcome, John. Good to see you there. Also, Sue is joining us from Massachusetts. Welcome, Sue. And Liz is joining us from the UK. Welcome, Liz. Great to see you there. And Jeff Rubel saying, what's happening? Oh, I see how this is going to be. Hey,
it's Raj. It's Raj rerunning Biff.
Yeah. Hey, Jeff, why don't you make like a tree and get lost?
Get out of here. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Jeff. And always good to see you out there. Randy Lee's also commenting, also starring Eric Stoltz in some Made Sense. Yeah, we'll get to that. Don is joining us, Don Bethman. He's joining us from Delaware. Welcome, Don. Good to see you out there. Martin is joining us from New York. He's saying this is heavy. Oh, boy. And let me see. Lou is also joining us. Lou is joining us from Rhode Island. Welcome, Lou. Good to see you there. And Bruce is also joining us from Canada, from Western Canada. Good to see you there, Bruce, too. Let me see here. And Linda is also out there joining us via YouTube. Welcome, Linda. Thank you for doing that. Appreciate it. We like to spread the info that we are, on several platforms now. And Jack Daly is also joining us. Welcome, Jack. Jack is saying he's doing the time warp in West Virginia. Good to see you there. Hey, and Vince is out there. Welcome, Vince. Good to see you out there as well. So, yeah. So, Back to the Future. Oh, Linda's commenting. She loves Eric Stoltz. Well, unfortunately, you're not going to love him in this film, Linda, because he got 86th. Oh, and we're saving the best for the last, or the worst. Matt's out there. Hey, Matt. Welcome to the show. Good to see you. So anyway, yeah, we are celebrating Time Travel Month, folks. So with that said,
again,
yeah, well, yeah, well, that's the beauty of time.
I'm having
travel.
deja vu. Yeah,
it repeats itself, and you can, kind of catch yourself, several times over. Hey, right. Jennifer Edens is also joining us. Welcome, Jennifer. Oh boy, here come the Back to the Future jokes. Roy and Ross are looking for a tab. Yeah. Anyway, a lot of nostalgia with this film, and like I was starting to say, we are celebrating Time Travel Month, so we are going to have a few surprises for the month, and also we will be doing our special holiday show, as we like to call it, which will be the day after Thanksgiving. So stay tuned for that. That should be very interesting. We will be announcing that probably within about the next week. So we'll be putting that out there. And I know Ross is like saying, when are we going to start talking about Back to the Future? Welcome, Nick McCarty. Welcome. Good to see you out there, Nick. And then Colin saying, surprises, you got a real time machine. We're working on it. We're working on it. So anyway, before we get started, I just want to say, just to remind everybody, and then we'll jump right in, that we are broadcasting not only on Facebook, we also are available on YouTube as well as Twitter. So definitely make sure you look into that if you haven't already. And we very much appreciate that. So thank you. So let's get started. Ross, this movie opened on July 3rd, 1985. Did you see it on opening day?
I did. Absolutely. Yeah. And I probably saw it a second time before the weekend was out. Because I had a sense. I mean, I was very receptive when I saw it, so I picked up on a lot of the foreshadowing and things that were nicely rounded off as the movie progressed. But I wanted to make sure I caught everything when I saw it the second time. Plus, I loved the movie.
Yeah,
they don't make movies like this anymore, where you leave the theater kind of euphoric. I don't know what the last movie I saw was, where you actually left the theater and felt good about things.
Probably Back to the Future.
Probably Back to the Future. Well, it's kind of true, because I say this rounds off a magic decade of kind of like the summer movie, like the Steven Spielberg blockbusters that started with Jaws in '75. I always kind of think Back to the Future kind of ended that run of where we had 10 years of these fabulous endless summers. It could be just my age, but it seems like there was as we got into the later 80s, there are a few films that kind of tried to recapture that kind of feel, but you didn't have, Back to the Future was like the most perfect example of a summer movie. And I don't think any of the subsequent movies ever really, bottled it, so efficiently and excellently as this film did, because it was also a good movie. It wasn't just unlike some of the films we were starting to see that weren't, top tier, that like all the Spielberg and Lucas knockoffs, they all focused on the technology and the high concept. And this is very high concept, but, really the characters and the story kind of propelled, it kept everybody interested. It wasn't just, we're out in space blowing stuff up, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but we've seen it before. We've seen it before. You know what I mean? And Back to the Future was the time travel movie that we didn't know we needed. It's like nobody knew we needed this movie, and you didn't have to be a geek to love it. Anybody went to this movie and they were drawn in by the wit and the humanity, and then the the crazy characters, which were just exaggerated versions of, it was like a screwball comedy time travel movie.
It had a little bit of everything for everybody, really. Yeah. And it really hit all the marks, and it was enjoyable. And, you bring up a good point about the summer movies. Now, granted, we were a lot younger and it was a different time. it was the 80s. And we were literally, we graduated in 84. So we were like a year out. And it was just a time when you would look forward to what was coming out. And that was that year for movies. If I remember correctly, there was a lot of like nostalgia. I'll say nostalgia movies, but St. Elmo's Fire, that was a movie that came out in 85. That, obviously it's not science fiction, but it was just kind of like, the summer type of film.
Rambo, you had, Cocoon was the same year. The Goonies.
Cocoon, in fact, Cocoon ranked number 2 for right after this film came out, because this was the number 1 film of 1985 right here.
Rocky IV, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, Silverado.
Yep.
I think Fletch was that year. I was in the movies constantly, but there was nothing any different than any other year. Up through a certain point, I saw every movie that I possibly could, and that was certainly the case in 85. And as the years went on, I felt less and less compelled to do that.
Yeah.
Enemy Mine, was that also 85?
Yeah, Jeff Ribble saying Enemy Mine. Brennan, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining.
In the theater.
Explorers, yeah. Matt's commenting. He's saying our livers and spleens were pristine and we're full of fresh.
The golden days. Yeah.
Oh, and you know what? How could we forget? Life Force came out in 85.
And Life Force, absolutely. Absolutely.
Don's commenting. He says, I remember a big Starlog convention in Philadelphia with Tom Baker as a guest. There were promos for Brazil, Life Force, and Back to the Future.
Right.
Brazil, yeah. Wow, yeah. The Hague also commented a little earlier. He said, I always thought the 80s always had summer blockbusters right up to 1989 with Star Trek 5.
Yeah, there were blockbusters. There were. It just felt like a kind of decadence. For me, it felt like a kind of decadence has kind of settled in at a point. It didn't have that purity. It didn't have the whole Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., Back to the Future.
Yeah, and that all started from the beginning.
I mean, there were a lot of things where they tried to recapture that, like Willow tried to be kind of Star Wars, but in a fantasy setting, that sort of thing. It's funny. Yeah, go ahead.
He said you built a time machine out of a Zoom and a laptop.
If only.
If only. Go ahead, Ross. I'm sorry.
Oh, the only. I think it was very, very late. It was like late 90s, 90, 98. The Mask of Zorro kind of recaptured some of that summer blockbuster feel for me. But that was like so far out of, and even at the time it was out, it was kind of, didn't really fit in with everything else that was going on at the time. It seemed like an 80s movie to me. But yeah, the 90s, we didn't have a lot of...
The Mask of Zorro, was that the film with Antonio Banderas?
Yes, and the naked French vampire. No, not really.
Okay.
No, yeah, it was Antonio Banderas and actually Catherine Zeta-Jones. Have you ever seen it?
No, and to be fair, part of it is because with Zorro, I just kind of steered away because I always thought of Guy Williams, in regards, to Zorro.
Yeah.
And I was just,
you get two Zorros. You get Anthony Banderas or Antonio Banderas. You get Anthony Hopkins as the elder Zorro, the mentor. So how could you not love it? But there's another Spielberg produced film.
There you go.
But it had kind of that belated 80s feel. I'm not saying it's another Back to the Future, but I enjoyed it quite a bit compared to other movies in the 90s when we started getting things like Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and I don't know, all the other crap we got in the 90s, Independence Day, and it's just
there's that threshold we will never cross into the 90s.
Yeah, the 90s were a really bad decade, and it only got worse.
Yeah, I know. Well, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. Christian is commenting. He's saying, Enemy Mine was good. It's the kind of sci-fi remake of John Borman's Hell Pacific.
Right. The gay blade, Zorro the gay blade. Yeah.
Sue is saying there's that word again, heavy. Why are things so heavy in the future? Is there a problem with the Earth's gravitational pull? Oh my goodness. Another quote from the movie. Good one, Sue. Yeah, Brennan is saying there were a few movies that felt 80s to me. True Lies, Jurassic Park, Independence Day, a few others.
See, they didn't do it for me. Thumbs down. Jurassic Park I enjoyed while I was watching it, but when I left the theater, I knew it was not Jaws.
Hey, I want to say hi to my friend Heather out there from work. Hey Heather, thanks for joining and thanks for stopping in to say hi. It's appreciated. Hope you're enjoying the show as Ross and I go back and forth and discuss movies.
Yeah, and just because I hate something doesn't mean you have to also. But it does gain you brownie points.
No, there's I'm not bashing the 90s. There's some stuff out there that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, there definitely is.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I could start running down. I could rattle off a half dozen movies that I just despise from the 90s, like off the top of my head. But
we're gonna.
I could do that for any decade, I suppose.
So we're gonna be positive.
We're gonna be positive though, so I'm not gonna mention those movies. I'm not gonna ruin my night.
I see Martin is commenting. I'm Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan. Man, the quotes are coming through from Back to the Future tonight.
Yeah, it was.
Sue's commenting. George McFly. Last night, Darth Vader came down from planet Vulcan and told me that if I didn't take Lorraine out, that he'd melt my brain.
Yeah. lot of quotable lines, a lot of memorable lines, and of course, we all saw this movie. Who said this Independence Day was fun? For whom?
That was a Facebook user out there who is unidentified. Please identify yourself. So Ross.
That's all right. You don't have to. I'd stay anonymous too if I said that.
Randy's saying that
Cisco
Yeah, I don't think so. Thanks, Randy, but I wouldn't put us on that level.
Yeah. Which is which?
Yeah. Now it's funny. I saw that comment about the George Hamilton Czar movie. Oh man, that was so bad. I don't even want to go there. I shouldn't even have brought it back.
Still better than a '90s movie, though.
Oh man, that was awful.
Still better than Independence Day.
You didn't like Independence Day?
I didn't like Independence Day. That was, for me, that was like the death knell of summer movies. Since that Roland Emmerich came along, I said, oh man, my summers are ruined for all time. Between that and the Star Wars prequels coming, and
well, we won't even go there.
Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and
you gotta admit though, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, it had that who was it? It was the title song to that movie was really good. It was oh my god, who sang that? That is on the tip of my tongue.
It didn't belong in a Robin Hood movie. I'm sorry.
No, but it was a really.
I don't want popular songs in my summer blockbusters. Thank you.
Come on, Ross. The power of love.
I know. This is the one movie though where it works. This movie perfectly captures the '80s. When I watch this movie, I feel like it's the '80s again.
Yeah,
and I'm not even like a pop music guy, but the whole setup at the beginning just makes me feel like I'm breathing the '80s again.
Yeah.
And,
Thank you, Liz. Brian Adams. It was on the tip of my tongue, and the Hague also said the same thing too.
All right.
No, I'm with you, Ross. I mean, seriously, in regards to this film, it had the tone of the '80s. It was a fun movie. It had, right from the outset too, when it started, it actually well, what do we call it? Chekhov's gun, but I mean, it was.
No, this movie is full of Chekhov's guns.
I mean, right out of the gates when they're talking about the plutonium that was stolen, and then they're saying that, and you have to laugh because what they're doing is they're saying it was stolen, and then they're saying that it was an inventory mess up. And I'm thinking, how do you mess up inventory and announce that? You know what I mean, on the air like that? It was just really funny. And then with the truck that you see at the beginning, that's just another example. But it was just like these little breadcrumbs that they had throughout the entire film.
Yeah. And Harold Lloyd hanging off the clock at the beginning, with among the timepieces, and everything that's laid out at the beginning comes back.
It was just done really, really well. And what's interesting though too is that the writer of this film, the two writers, it was Zemeckis, Robert Zemeckis, and then the other writer was Bob Gale, and evidently they were friends and collaborators.
Right.
And they had started this project back like around 1980, and they tried to distribute it, and I think it got overturned like something like a ridiculous amount of times. It was like 44 times or something like
over
that.
40 times they got rejected.
Yeah.
Because they'd already written a number of films, and they actually worked with Spielberg a few times, but they kind of gained a reputation as those guys that wrote scripts that people thought were going to be good movies, but then nobody went to see them. So, none of the studios wanted to touch Back to the Future.
Right.
And they didn't want to keep relying on Spielberg's largesse because he was the only one that was employing them. They wanted to get the movie made themselves. Fortunately, they did romance. Zemeckis did Romancing the Stone, and that was a hit. So they were able to get people interested in their, but not unalloyed enthusiasm. As usual, the suits. They would always have the things they wanted to change about the project, and they're always like studio executives, heads, and executives have done good work over the years. You have people like David O. Selznick who would micromanage and create these great films like Gone with the Wind and Portrait of Jenny and what have you. They're not always correct 100% of the time, but the anecdotes that we always get are from these Philistines that head the studios. They have no idea what they're talking about. and you just roll your eyes and say, well, thank God they didn't go with that idea. So yeah, as you said though, and Gale, Zemeckis and Gale had already written, 4 films or something before this, and Spielberg wound up producing several of them. And in fact, they wrote the Kolchak episode. Remember the chopper, the one with the headless horseman on the motorcycle?
Yes, that was them.
It was their first script that got filmed. Yeah. They didn't direct it. He didn't direct it, but that was their script. Yeah.
I did not realize that. Now that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to welcome. I see Gwen is joining us. Hey, Gwen, good to see you out there. She's saying, "Hey, Roy and Ross, happy Friday! A movie I've actually seen. Yay!"
Yeah.
Colin is saying, "So many great bits in this film. That's what makes it one of the greats." And Linda's commenting, saying that realizing she didn't pay enough attention to the details in this movie. But yeah, I mean, if you definitely have the opportunity to see this movie, go back and watch it, because again, there's just little innuendos, little trails, and it really makes it fun too, especially if you're looking out for it and being very observant.
It was so well constructed. Like I said, I had to go back and see it again right away, but I just had that whole, it was like an inversion of It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
The whole thing with, George Bailey, like what would it be like if he got his wish and didn't live, and you see and they kind of do that in the sequel to Back to the Future, the first one. You could see the alternate, reality that's created. But in this one, it's like, what happens if he did live, if he shows up and messes up history, and how do you fix that? But I was interested to see that. I wasn't the only one that loved the script, because it was nominated for an Academy Award, which is unusual for a summer blockbuster. You always get the technical awards, but you seldom get, a nomination for something like screenplay, best original screenplay. But it's also taught apparently at USC as an example of a perfect script, perfect screenplay.
Yeah,
which is one of the better.
About it, it's quite an honor, and it's actually in the library. I think it's of is it the Library of Congress, where it's listed as one of the best top films of that have been made, which is really, really amazing.
Well, it is a very well, constructed movie, very well made, well crafted movie. I mean, it's I would say it's a slick movie, but that would imply that it's kind of cold and calculated, and it's not.
No, it's very, I'll say it's very pure, and it's just the way it was done, and it's almost like it's lightning. It's like lightning in a bottle. In fact, Zemeckis and Gale had said that as long as they're alive, there will be no reboots of this film, and that there's not going to be anything to have this redone on any level. Right. So some things are just best left alone. I mean, not to say that a reboot is a bad thing with certain things, and if you want to revisit it and redo it or extend it, but in terms of this is a prime example of what. Don't try to recreate it, because it's a masterpiece, and certain things should just be left alone, and this is one of them.
They'll do something eventually. I mean, Zemeckis is 70.
Yeah.
So you figure in another 20, 30 years, somebody's going to mess with it.
Yeah.
At the most. Yeah.
Jeff is commenting. He said Zanuck was a good studio head. Jaws, Star Wars, Planet of the Apes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of these guys have successes to their names, and sometimes they'll do boneheaded things. Some are more intelligent and more canny than others. Studio heads. Zanuck had a good track record, but the guys they worked with on Back to the Future, though, the whole backstory of this, they pitched it, as Roy said, like 40 some times, and they took it to Columbia. And I deliberately didn't write down the guys' names, because I didn't want to say stuff on the air here, because I'll wind up getting it wrong and getting sued, or it's like you could just say like some studio head at Columbia at the time didn't want to do the picture, but he did, but he had like all these changes he wanted to make to it. And what happened was that they went over to Universal. Oh yeah, because after Romancing the Stone got made, they finally could get the fund. Like Spielberg stepped up and said, "Okay, I'll produce it for you," because Columbia is going to do it, and so they had their break. But then Columbia got a hold of it, and the guy who was the head of the studio at or Universal got a hold of it. The guy who was the head at Columbia moved over to Universal then, and then they refused to. They didn't want to work with him because he had rejected it over at Columbia. And then Spielberg didn't want to work with him either because he had rejected, the same guy had rejected E.T. Right. So they all had it in for this guy. Yeah.
And that's where it's, it's tough because it's like you have to get along and, in order to get things made. Hey, I want to welcome Valerie. Valerie is joining us from Florida. Valerie, welcome. Good to see you out there and I hope you're doing well. I haven't talked to Valerie in a long time. And then also Greg Player is joining us and he's joining us from Edinburgh, Scotland. And I'm trying to bring, one moment here.
Was he here before? I remember Edinburgh another time a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I do too. I think he was. Hold on one.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. And he's saying, hi from Edinburgh, Scotland. What a film. I so love the DeLorean car. I think they were all built in Belfast, Northern Ireland.
Wow, really?
Well, that's really
cool. I think I mentioned on the show once before, and I don't know why. In the 1980s, I used to walk to high school, and I would walk past this one business on 25th Street in Easton, and it was not a car dealership, but the guy who had the business somehow had a DeLorean. And he kept it in his display window in whatever the business was. And every day I'd walk past this DeLorean in the display window. And this would have been in 1983, 84. So it was before Back to the Future opened. And of course, the big joke is the DeLorean was kind of like the Edsel of its day. It's the DeLorean it looked cool. It wasn't quite a gremlin. It didn't explode if you touched it, but
no, it was very
cool. Very, very impractical, and nobody really, what are you going to do? You pull into the mall parking lot, and you can't open the doors.
Well, the doors remind me of the cars from the television series UFO, because that show took place in the 1980s, and the doors would actually go up the same way, so it was very similar to that.
You'd have to park at an angle.
Yeah. And I think if I remember correctly, I think John DeLorean actually lived in New Jersey. I think he was at maybe an hour up the road, I think in Bedminster or somewhere around there.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly. Lou is commenting. He says, I don't know what I was doing in 1985, but I didn't see BTTF, Back to the Future, until about 5 years later.
I'm sorry that you didn't see it with an audience, unless you did, because it really worked with an audience. I mean, everybody just lapped it up. It was a really good time at the movies.
Yeah.
And as I said, you didn't have to be a sci-fi geek. It appealed to, it was a multi-generational thing. You could see it with your parents. The parents would be into it. It was just an all around, well-crafted, fun time at the movies. Made you feel good. What I was saying about Columbia, the thing was that the president of Columbia Pictures didn't think the script was raunchy enough because everything was like Porky's and Fast Time at Ridgemont High. You remember all the sex comedies they had in the 80s. And they wanted to make that part of this guy wanted to make that part of the film. And then they pitched it to Disney and they thought the film was too risque. So it was the opposite. They said, oh, we can't do this because Marty McFly's mother has the hots for him. And, we don't want to tarnish the reputation of the studio. Of course, Disney today, right. They would have all the characters decapitated in the first scene and not care about it.
Here come the studio heads. Here come
but back in the 80s, that was the thing, It's like, oh, we're Disney. We can't do that.
It's amazing what 40 years does, isn't it?
Yeah.
Martin saying, can I get a Pepsi free?
There was a lot of product placement in the movie.
Oh, yeah. Burger King was in the background at one point. Yeah. They were good and not even getting paid as long as they were there. The Hague is saying same studio head that told Harrison Ford he ain't gonna make it.
Right. And Clint Eastwood, they're always telling Clint Eastwood his Adam's apple's too big and he's never gonna be a star. And everybody's an authority, until they're not. And these guys get replaced as often as anybody else. These studio heads. That's what's crazy. The heads are always rolling.
Yeah. Hey, Claudia Combs is joining us. Claudia, welcome. Hope you're doing well. Great to see you out there as well, too. Jerry is also joining us. Jerry Seward. Welcome, Jerry. He's saying, hi, Roy and Ross. Back to the Future is probably the movie I saw the most times in the theater. It was playing at my local theater for several months, and I kept going back to see it every week. Like Raiders of the Lost Ark and Jaws, I just thought it was a flawless film. Yeah, I mean,
It was really solid.
it hit the marks. Oh,
Yeah.
Lewis saying he saw the movie on a beta cassette. Oh, beta.
Oh man.
Randy Leo, yeah, Porky's. You want to hear a funny Porky story? This is a true story. So we were supposed to go into New York City. It was in April. I think it was April of 1981, if I remember the date correct. And it was a freshman trip. I think that's when it was, or for whatever reason, it was some kind of class trip into New York. We were going to go see. It was a Broadway show, very cultured, very proper. Enjoy the arts, enjoy the city. Go in. Major snowstorm comes through, and what happens is school gets closed. That gets canceled, and then what happens? Your cousin Joe Metz, myself, and I think a couple other people. Maybe it was even Joe Brickman. I'm not sure. What did we go see? We saw Porky's.
Oh man,
at the Easton Eric.
No, I wouldn't go see. Not when you're getting like USA Up All Night for free or whatever it was. I'm not going to go to the theater and watch Porky's.
Oh, that was so bad.
Yeah.
It
was Bob Clark. I mean, you never saw A Christmas Story. That's the guy who did A Christmas Story.
And his wife was in that movie too. Was it Candy Clark?
Oh, was he married to Candy Clark?
I think so.
Oh wow.
Well, I mean, I'm reaching, but I think.
Yeah,
so.
I didn't know. I don't know.
No, wait a minute.
Anymore, but
no, it wasn't it Alex. What was his name? Somebody out there is going to jump in and say something about it. He was on that TV show Webster, wasn't it? Alex. Oh God.
I know the show, but I never really.
Alex Carraris, and I think his wife.
Karras?
Yeah, Alex Karras, and his wife is Candy. I can't remember. It's a while. Okay. But anyway, yeah.
Bob Clark is the director, is what I meant. Yeah,
right.
The same guy who did Christmas Story. Yeah.
And the woman, all roads lead to Star Trek because Valaris, the woman that's in whatchamacallit, in that TV series Sex and the City with or used to be on Sex and the City, Kim Cattrall. She was actually in that film. She played a character named Lassie. Anyway, we're really going down the rabbit hole.
Porky's? Okay.
In Porky's, yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. But
she played a Vulcan. She played a Vulcan in Star Trek: The Undiscovered Country in 1991, and in 1981 she was playing Lassie in Porky's. You could see the difference there, and I'll leave it at that.
There you go. Wasn't she in Mannequin? I think she was in Mannequin.
Yes.
With McCarthy, and they were filmed. I remember when they were filming that at Wanamaker's in Philly.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
that was a very cute. Now that movie is like that's a typical '80s movie right there. That film.
I don't think I've seen it yet, but maybe I have. I didn't see it in the theater. I'll tell you that.
Jefferson Starship did the soundtrack.
Really?
Yeah.
Why not?
Why not?
They should have gotten Kraftwerk. Showroom dummies.
Hey, I want to say hi to Dennis Chevalier. He's out there. He's joining us from Canada. Welcome, Dennis. Hope you're doing well. Christian saying they were almost right. Ross Clint was already in his mid-30s when Sergio Leone hired him for a fistful of dollars. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, Clint's 90. I think he's the same age as William Shatner. I think he's 91, if I'm not mistaken. Thinking about it. Yeah, and there's a comment here, and I think Linda had placed it, and I kind of passed over it by accident. Or no, maybe it was even Martin, I'm sorry, about how they were originally going to conceive the time machine to actually be a refrigerator.
Yeah, which is funny because Spielberg nixed it because he didn't want kids climbing into the refrigerator, supposedly. Right. And yet he goes and uses the same stunt in the Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah, right. And then
it's dangerous for Back to the Future, but it's okay for Indy to lock himself in one of those old 50s refrigerators with no latch on the inside. Yeah.
Brennan is saying Back to the Future and The Breakfast Club both played important roles in the Ready Player One book, not the movie.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I still have not seen the movie or read the book. So, oh my God, Porky's. OMG, Porky. That's what I think every time I hear Porky's. Yeah, seeing the trailers was enough.
Randy's saying, okay, I have an admission. I was 15 working at the only VHS rental store in town. I would like me and my friends would rent Porky's, even though technically I was not allowed to. Phew, glad that I got that off my chest.
Confession
Good
is
job
good for
coming
the
clean.
soul.
And he did it right here on Roy's tie-dye sci-fi corner.
Yeah, right.
You messed up though, Randy. You should have said this last week when we were in costume, because I was a priest, and then I would have kind of, I would have blessed you.
Father Roy, yeah.
Oh boy. Matt saying Ralph Crandon.
Matt.
There's your free pass, Matt. That was the one for tonight.
That was not restraint. Matt was just too tired to finish the sentence. ... Yeah.
Jack saying Webster had a Star Trek the motion picture poster on his bedroom door in the show. That's all I remember about Webster.
Okay.
Oh, Don is saying, yeah, Hot Tub Time Machine.
Yeah, I still haven't seen that one either. Yeah,
that was a fun movie. That was a fun movie. That I'll have to,
Yes, some of the other things that they wanted to change is it wasn't the same guy who was the president of Columbia. It's the guy who was eventually in charge of overseeing Back to the Future. But when you have Steven Spielberg as the producer, they don't have as much authority, because this was like prime speed. He was at his peak at this point. He had already done, Jaws and Close Encounters and Raiders and E.T. So nobody's going to cross Spielberg at this point. Right. But the one studio exec suggested they change the name of the movie to Spaceman from Pluto, or Spaceman from Pluto. Because he thought time would put people off. Like nobody wants to see a time travel movie. It's too genre. And then how they responded, he wrote it in a memo to them. So they wrote back. Spielberg wrote a reply as if he had meant it as a joke. He said, "Oh, that was a good one,"
But he was serious.
Yeah, that was a great one, Sid. Keep them coming.
Could you imagine if this movie had been made with that title? I mean,
so the irony is, this studio wanted to change Back to the Future to Spaceman from Pluto, but Golan and Globus, Canon Films, they were afraid to release the film under the title Space Vampires. The one that they released as Life Force, and I think that Space Vampires would have helped the box office. I think of Life Force.
Whereas absolutely.
It would have been the opposite with this one. Nobody wants to see Spaceman from Pluto.
No, it would have had nothing to do with this movie whatsoever.
Except Ed Wood. Ed Wood might have liked it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of Ed Wood, there was an issue with the sequels to Back to the Future with Crispin Glover. We haven't talked about the actors yet, but he kind of Crispin Glover is a peculiar guy, very talented actor. But
very
intelligent man.
Very intelligent.
Yeah, very intelligent, a little peculiar.
Right.
But he, so they were kind of uncomfortable working with him to begin with, from what I understand. But he priced himself out of the sequels. He wanted too much money. So what did they do? They went and they would use footage from the first film, because I don't know if you may have or may not have seen Back to the Future Part 2, but the critics were kind of hard on it. It was kind of got mixed reviews because it was just too clever for its own good, and it relied so closely on the first film and kind of you see the first film from a different angle, let's say, because they compound more and more levels onto the first film. But since Crispin Glover's character is in it, they could use footage from the first film, but there were certain scenes where you were led to believe it was Crispin Glover that was acting. It was some other guy with the prosthetic, or they film them from the back or whatever. And this is called shemping. And it was coined, the term was coined by Sam Raimi in reference to Shemp of the Three Stooges, because when Shemp died, apparently there were some unfinished projects and they had to get a different actor to come in to kind of pose as Shemp in different scenes so they could complete the Three Stooges shorts. So they literally Shemped Crispin Glover in the sequels, and he sued
them. Yeah.
And won for that. Um, but it reminded me of a very Ed Wood thing to do, because that's exactly what happened.
Bela
You just did
Lugosi.
Plan 9 from outer space, and that's exactly that's when the Sam Raimi coined it after watching Plan 9, and he said that they shemped.
Well, it's
Lugosi.
hysterical too. I mean, going back to that, because we just, as Ross brought up, we did that
Yeah.
at Country Gate, and it was a lot of fun. It was a tribute for Halloween month, and we did it as a mystery science fiction 3000, and also a kind of like a Rocky Horror, where we were on stage. There was 9 of us, and essentially we were critiquing the film and then doing different bits, and hats off to Bill Scarato. Bill wrote everything in regards to having everything laid out, and it was very entertaining. There was singing and everything, and he worked everything in, and it we did it for 2 days, and we watched that movie over and over again because we needed to, because it was part of the process, and different things had been cut out. But you have to feel sorry for Ed Wood, because he really was putting his heart and soul into it, and he really wanted it to be this serious spectacular. And we talked about Night of the Living Dead a couple weeks ago with Bill, and really, if you think about it, it was along the same lines, where they had this project and they went with it. It's just that the difference was that succeeded, whereas unfortunately Plan 9 succeeded in, what do they say, no, if any type of coverage or any type of notoriety or any type
notoriety, right?
Yeah, is good. Any type of press is good, whether it's good or bad. And unfortunately,
Right.
it got the Golden Turkey Award as the worst movie ever made. And let me tell you something, after seeing it probably like 20 times over, it really, it was really bad.
Ooh, 20 times. Wow.
Yeah.
I've seen it a few times, but I space it out. Maybe once every 7 or 8 years.
It's really funny, because we did this, especially like all weekend. And then I was even saying to Vince about it, that in the back of my mind, especially like on Monday, I've got these songs that are totally, reoccurring in my mind. In fact, Allie, I'm not sure if Allie's out there tonight, but she was saying she called that earworm, where you constantly hear like the same song over and over again. And it was just like, wow. And even the dialogue, it just was kind of like an after effect of this, but it was just, if anybody has not seen that movie, I just suggest watch it once and you'll know what I'm talking about. But anyway, in regards to Crispin Glover, though, very eccentric. This was the start of his acting career, and he was very nervous about doing this film, and to the point where he was very shaky, but it actually added to the character development for the father that he was playing, Marty's dad in this. And evidently, I mean, they weren't too happy about the approach, but at one point, I think he even lost his voice. And what he did was he mouthed his lines. And then what he had to go back and do was he had to redub, because he was just, he couldn't, perform.
Right. Yeah. He's something else.
Yeah, he is. He totally is.
Yeah. And, he was 3 years younger than Michael Fox, They played his dad. Now, I don't know if you ever saw, he was on the Letterman, on the Letterman show back when it was late night, not the late show with Letterman, but the old NBC show. I don't know if you ever saw the appearance that he did on there. It's on YouTube, but I remember seeing it the first time. I never forgot it, because he came on and he pulled a total Andy Kaufman. You didn't know if it was a put on or if he was the real deal. He came on in these elevator shoes with this wig, and he just had this total out there exchange with Letterman, and Letterman was not in on the joke. If it was a joke, apparently later, from what I've read, he was there actually trying to promote a movie he was working on, but the movie was an independent film that wasn't released for like another 5 years. So Letterman had no idea what was going on. But at one point, he gets up and he does a karate kick, like right in Letterman's face, and just misses him. And Letterman goes, all right, he says, I got to go check on the top 10 list or whatever. And they go to commercial, and they come back, and Glover's gone. And they had to fill the dead air. They had to fill the time because they had no guest, because he got thrown off the show. Apparently, there was no hard feelings. They had him back a couple of times after that, but at the time, he didn't know that it was like supposed to be a put on.
Well, it's funny you're saying that, because Don commented and he said Crispin Glover did an uncomfortable high kick on Letterman. Also put out also put out a stream of
Yeah.
conscious CDs that is unique. So I'll have to
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
check that out.
And he's written a ton of books too, apparently. I mean, he's a
Yeah.
brilliant guy. He's
Mhm.
obviously he just doesn't operate on the same wavelength as the rest of us.
Do you remember the actor Bruce Glover by any chance?
Uh from is he the James Bond actor?
Yes, he was in the
Diamonds
71
Are Forever? Or, yeah,
Diamonds Are Forever. It was
yeah,
him and Mr. What was it? Mr. Hyde. It was the dark
right,
haired guy, and then the other guy, and he was taller. He kind of had like a shaved head and the glasses. Bruce
right.
Glover was the shorter guy, and he looks just like his dad. I mean, you could tell, you could see the family resemblance,
Ah,
and that's his father. And in
ah,
fact, if you're a Battlestar Galactica fan out there, uh, back from 1978, there was a Battlestar Galactica episode called "The Young Warriors," and anybody that remembers Audrey Landers back from the day, um, she was one of the Landers sisters. There's Audrey, and then there was Judy. Judy Landers was on BJ and the Bear, I believe, with Greg
okay.
Evigan. But she was in that episode, and playing the father in that was Bruce Glover. So those are the two
Oh,
things.
okay. All right.
So check it out. I actually remember seeing that down in Florida. We were visiting my grandparents. And you know what, Ross, you want to laugh? It was in 78, and it was in November, and that episode of Galactica was on, and then and it was right around Thanksgiving, and you know what else I saw down there? The
Uh,
Star Wars Holiday Special.
oh, the Star Wars Holiday Special. That was heartwarming.
That was awful.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, the other thing that I wanted to mention, you talking about Plan 9, there's another Roy connection to this. First, I want to mention how this film came about. Uh, Bob Gale, one of the co-writers for this thing, it was flipping through a yearbook, and he saw his dad in the yearbook, and he conjectured aloud. He says, "Well," he said, "I wonder what it would have been like, had I known my dad in high school. Would we have been friends?" And this got Robert Zemeckis thinking. This is and Zemeckis says, it's funny because my mom always tells these stories about school, and I swear, there are all kinds of discrepancies, in the different stories she tells. So the two of them got this idea to do this 1950s movie. Somebody would travel back to the 50s, meet their parents. So that was kind of the core of this kind of thing. It hadn't been, totally smoothed out yet, but I do remember back around 1980, you, Roy, were working on a story for a film that was very similar to Back to the Future. And you thought of it probably around the same time they thought of theirs, because they were working on theirs around 1980.
It's funny I was going to ask you if you remembered that.
Yeah, what was the name of that film?
Oh God, I don't even remember. And somewhere I don't even. Didn't you actually have a copy of that, or didn't I leave that
Oh,
with
you
you?
know what? I in this this box I have under this very chair, I have a lot of stories, and I do have. I don't have. Do I have the story? Your actual story for it?
I
I
think
know I
you
have
did.
like some kind of poster art I did for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't dig
And
it out though.
my idea was it was the son was riding a bicycle. The bicycle was the time machine.
Yeah.
And I thought of it because back in the day I had a Raleigh bike, because my dad worked for a company that was in England, was a company that was based out of the UK, and they were owned. Well, the company was owned by a company from the UK, from the England, to our English friends out there, and the bike I had was a Raleigh bike, and it was very unique because the bike actually could fold up. And I thought it was like the coolest thing. And it was really convenient if you wanted to put it into the car and for traveling and what have you. So anyway, it was something that I had came up with, that this was like a time machine, and he goes back into time. And I'm trying to remember, this was a long time ago.
Because when the bike hits 88 miles per hour, it goes back to 1955.
Yeah, I don't think it was like that, but
You might have a case here, Roy. The statues probably run out on it.
probably. But anyway, he uses it, and I think the basis of that was him saving his dad's life, and then that way he was going to,
because he was a voyeur, and he was looking at Lorraine and in the middle of the street.
There you go. But yeah, that is a true story though about the script I wrote.
There you go.
Yeah, you got to take that out, Ross.
Multi-million-dollar idea there, Roy.
Yeah.
Billions now. Yeah.
And here we are talking about it.
He doesn't want much, just a percentage of the DVD sales, the Blu-ray sales.
0.5% will be good. What do you think, Russ?
0.5%. Yeah.
Not greedy.
Not greedy.
Oh, shoot. True story. Colin is saying Roy's idea
His
was
idea is
stolen.
stolen. Yep. By Robert Zemeckis. You heard it here for the first time.
One of the greatest episodes of any show in the history of TV. Yeah. Oh, Randy Lee is saying this, the Lander sisters. Yeah, you know what, Randy? If the next time Mike and Mary Beth from Sci-Fi Distilled, in fact, they were just on last week. Ask Mike about the Lander sisters, and he'll tell you what he all about them, because he actually got to work with them, and I remember him telling that story. So, but I'll save that for Mike. So next time you see him, if you tune into their show, just bring that up in the comment section, and I'm sure Mike will smile about that. Sue was saying that's so cool that Roy had an idea for the time travel movie at around the same time that Hollywood was dreaming up the very same script. Can I have your autograph, Roy? You can, Sue, and I won't even charge you for it.
That's a novelty these days.
Oh boy, should I put Matt's comment up?
I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know what it is, but if you have to ask.
He's saying, sounds like David Lynch when he was thinking, I wonder what would happen if a 40s lounge happens to be cabbage and monkey kills.
No, that joke is so far inside, but it's on YouTube. It is on YouTube. David Lynch with the monkey.
See, Mary Beth is jumping in. Rizzo will tell you his stories. Yeah. That means you remember, right, Mary Beth? And the Lander sisters were the Betty's on Quirk callback. No, they weren't. But yeah, anyway, they were. I heard a handful to deal with, but anyway. No, let's take a look. Actually, I do want to share the screen and a couple things too, real quick. So we always like to say all roads do lead to Star Trek. So again, that is the case here, as they do. Leah Thompson actually directed recently 2 episodes from Star Trek Picard in the 2nd season, and obviously she played Lorraine Baines McFly, Marty's mom. So there's the Star Trek connection, which is kind of cool. And there's a picture of her with Patrick Stewart or Jean-Luc Picard, and then of course her with Marty, and probably the scene that, or the idea that was going to keep Disney from buying this film, right? Taking it on. And then also, we always like to give Starlog magazine a nod, because back in the day, before the internet, there was Starlog, and that was always the go-to magazine, and I still have my copies to this day. And then, of course, on the cover, 1985, Mad Max, Mel Gibson. And then there's, and this is issue number 97, there's an interview with Robert Zemeckis talking about this film, because it was just right around the time.
And there's Life Force.
And then there's Life Force. Yes.
On the left. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Wow. Fright Night, The Black Cauldron, Red Sonja, Cocoon.
Yep.
Wow.
All the heavy hitters of that year.
Yeah. What an era. Oh, and also the stuff. Except the stuff.
The right stuff or just the stuff?
No, just the Larry Cohen's The Stuff. Yeah.
Do you remember Fright Night?
Absolutely. With Roddy McDowall. Yeah.
Yeah. That was another one.
Yeah.
Another great film. I think that film came out in July of '85. That was a turbulent. That was an interesting year, but I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
But yeah. So anyway, there is that, and then also some movie memories. I just have a few photos. So again, you've got Michael J. Fox in his role, and actually, too. Speaking of Michael J. Fox, the studio wanted Michael J. Fox, or Zemeckis, excuse me, Zemeckis. Yeah, they wanted him right from the beginning. But as everybody remembers that, grew up in that era or watched TV in that era, that he was on a hit NBC show, which was called Family Ties. Mm-hmm. And at that time, Meredith Baxter Birney was pregnant, and Michael J. Fox was actually taking on a lot of the the weight of the show.
Mhm.
And they wanted him for it, and I think it was one of the producers of the show did not actually pass on the message that he was wanted,
Right.
and which to me is really, I mean, that's
Yeah,
that's that's a
never
no.
gave him the script. Yeah.
Yeah. So what
But
they did was,
yeah,
oh, go ahead,
yeah.
Ross.
No, you go.
I was going to
You're
say
telling it.
what I was going to say is they actually decided to go with Eric Stoltz, and supposedly too, they had actually interviewed a lot of different actors for the role before that they actually came to settle on Eric Stoltz. And I think one of
Yeah,
them,
yeah. Apparently, C. Thomas Howell was a front runner. You know, you remember he played one of the kids in E.T.
yes,
He was in The Hitcher. You know, he was in a number of things, but he never really
wasn't
got
he?
the.
Was he in Soul Man?
He was.
Yes,
He
and
was.
that's a movie that would not be made today.
No,
And
because people would just dismiss it out of hand. Well, dismiss is the wrong word. They go crazy out of hand instead
right.
of. I never saw it, so I can't really defend it. But I don't think that the point was. You know, I'm not
Right.
going to get into it.
No,
but,
no, no. We're not going to go down that. But yeah,
let's just say C. Thomas plays almost the entire movie in blackface. So,
right. Yeah.
and then we won't touch it.
No.
But you know, his star never really took off to the extent that it was predicted that it would. And if he had had a movie like Back to the Future, maybe it would have. I don't know, but I just can't see him in this role.
John Cusack was a consideration.
Yeah.
Johnny Depp, Ralph Macchio, Charlie Sheen, John Cryer, Peter DeLuise, Billy Zane. Billy Zane was in this film as well too. Didn't even have a line in the film, but he was one of the henchmen or hench kids, I should say. Robert Downey Jr., who we saw him in Back to School in 1986 with Rodney Dangerfield's movie, and then and also he did the movie with Mel Gibson too, the copper, the chopper.
Right.
Matthew Modine, Corey Hart. These were all, you know, from our era that, you know, considerations. And
Corey Feldman.
Corey Feldman, yeah. Yeah.
Was Corey Feldman in there too?
No, but
Okay.
we'll just throw him in there.
I'm sure every one of the Goonies was considered.
Yeah, there you go. Well,
No,
Goonies, that was, yeah, another 85 movie.
Same year, yeah. But anyway, so they wound up going with Stoltz, who they all agreed was a fine actor.
Oh yeah, and he had done The Mask that I think that same year or the year before.
And Sam Elliott, yeah,
playing Rocky.
Right. But he just wasn't a good fit for this film. He was very intense, very method.
Yeah.
He refused to answer to anything except Marty, and apparently, you know, took his role very seriously. Anytime there was an altercation with Biff, apparently he didn't hold back at all. Depending on the account you read, there were bruises or fractures involved.
Well, and that's the funny thing too, because with Thomas Wilson, who played Biff, he really did a good job with the part, because really, I mean, the guy, I mean, I think I've seen him in one or two interviews, and he comes across, I mean, he supposedly too, he's a very nice guy, but it's just that, you know, he plays such also I can say it, he plays such a jackass in this movie, and it's just that you really get sold on it. But he was just one of those guys who was really a nice guy. And to your point, Eric Stoltz was coming on very intense and, you know, doing the method, and he wasn't letting up. And I think that I even read at one point, I guess before they dismissed him because they felt that he wasn't a right fit, he was going to get back at him, and he was going to, when he slugs Marty in the stomach in that one scene, he was really going to sock him. But then what happened was they 86'd him. And it's sad, because it's just that he just wasn't right for the part. But I totally see how you did want to have the right person, because, and I think if you go on YouTube too, there are still some clips out there, or if you have the Blu-ray, they have the deleted scenes, and you can see a lot of what was filmed.
Oh, yeah, they filmed a lot. Apparently, they worked with them for about a month. You know, and they had to refilm all of the scenes that had Marty in there, and they had to walk this really delicate line, because they were striving for, they wanted like a you know, there's tension in the film and everything, but they wanted it to be a light kind of comedic touch, and Stoltz was just not that kind of actor, and he knew that too.
Right.
He said, "Well, what'd you cast me for?" But they had to handle it very carefully, because they were afraid that if they got rid of Stoltz, right, because they could see from the dailies it wasn't working, and you know, independently, people were arriving at the conclusion that this was not going to work and it had to be recast. But if they got rid of him outright, they were afraid the production was going to get shut down and the movie would get,
Can.
shelved.
Right.
So they had to wait until Michael Fox could be free to actually bring him onto the set at the time that they were, that Zemeckis called Stoltz into the office and said, look, this isn't working and we have to go with somebody else. And he still got his full paycheck at least,
Yeah, because they weren't trying to stick it to him. It's just that
Yeah.
he just wasn't right for the film. And
Yeah.
it's just the way it worked out. But they did take care of him in that sense. And I guess too, when they were notifying the cast, Christopher Lloyd didn't even know what his name was because, like you said, I mean,
He had to
he
be
thought his
called
name was Marty, and
Yeah.
he just thought it was coincidental. But
Mhm.
when they said Eric was let go, he was like, "Who?" He had
Yeah.
no clue. And then also, again, with Thomas Wilson was advised about it. He was called in. He thought he was getting to be let go, and he was really nervous about it, and he was very, upset. And then he
Mhm.
found out that it was Eric Stoltz, and there was a lot of relief on the set because the tension it just wasn't meshing. He didn't
Yeah.
really deal with people, and then when they brought in Michael J. Fox, he pretty much would eat with them. He was just very laid back. I
Right.
mean, he's
Right.
a really kind of a laid back type of a guy.
Right. Right. And they were able to work something out finally with the producer. Good. Spielberg himself picked up the phone and called and said, look, we want Michael.
Yeah,
So they worked out a deal. And what happened was Michael J. Fox would have to come and do this at night and
double
then go
digit.
back and do Family Ties during the day. So he was operating on very little sleep.
Yeah, and then for the day shots where they were filming outside, they were shooting that on the weekends. So
Yeah.
essentially, I mean, he for at least what I think for several months, because the principal photography on this movie started, ironically enough, when they started with Eric Stoltz, November 26th of 1984, which is literally right around Thanksgiving time, and that's coming up this month. So
Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Finish your
I
sentence.
was,
And then I
I
got
was just going to say it's literally 38 years ago that they were actually filming this movie, which is kind of crazy. And what happened was they stopped and they didn't get Michael J. Fox until January. And originally the film was supposed to wrap in February, and then it wound up wrapping on April 26th of 1985, which is kind of an irony because that time frame for me is, I'm Mr. As Vince will point out, I'm Rain Man with dates. But anyway, go ahead. What were you going to say, Ross?
No, the timeline of the movie. Did you take note of the time that the movie starts and that the day when he goes back to 1955? Wasn't it November 5th
Yeah,
that he goes back? I mean, we're practically on the date. And it's funny now because the time change. The whole reason we picked this movie is because we're turning the clocks back.
right.
Tomorrow night before you go to bed. Don't forget to do that. We're falling back. But
Yeah.
at the time that the movie was out, I don't think that the time change had been moved to that time yet because that whole thing got moved. I think with George W. Bush. I think that's when they moved the. We used to change the clocks at a
Oh,
different
right.
time. Remember when
Right.
they
Yes.
changed that? But it just happens by coincidence that would be this weekend, which is the same weekend that the anniversary when Marty McFly would go back to 1955 in the movie. So
That would have really messed them up, huh? Forgot to take into consideration daylight savings time.
yeah. That's when Rod Serling comes in at the end.
Oh, that would have been appropriate. Sue's commenting. She's saying, from IMDb, when Marty is being chased by terrorists, Eric Stoltz is playing Marty. Michael J. Fox was later chosen over him, but they kept the driving scenes at the mall with Stoltz in since the shots were fairly distant and the driver's face is not particularly visible.
Yeah, see, that's another thing that they probably wouldn't have messed around. Yeah, Bonfire Night. There you go. Yeah, it's Guy Fawkes. Yeah. That's another thing they probably would have a hard time doing today was the whole thing with the in a movie of this sort where they kind of take it. It's like a blithe kind of movie. It's not a serious movie, but the whole thing with the Libyan terrorists,
Right.
which back in the 80s, it was just like, it was just a plot device for us. We didn't care. But I mean, the movie dealt with all kinds of crazy stuff when you think about it. It's kind of subversive for a mainstream blockbuster. You have the whole thing with the weird Oedipus complex stuff going on with the mother.
Right.
You've got the race stuff. I mean, there's an overt scene where a slur is used, as a kind of in a humorous fashion. You remember when they breaks the lock off and Marty's in the trunk of the car and the guys get out of the car.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes,
And then
exactly.
the whole thing with the Libyans, which I think were actually played by a couple of guys with Irish last names. They're obviously not ethnically correct or what have
Right.
you. And and there was something else in it that was like, man, the things that they did in this movie that they wouldn't even attempt to do uh, today. Yeah, I'm sure I jotted it down somewhere. You had oh yeah, and the whole climax of the film that's kind of you're in the middle of this comedy, this lighthearted romp, and then there's basically this threat of this sexual assault at the end with
Right.
Biff.
Yeah.
It becomes very intense suddenly. It's like, whoa,
Yeah.
what are we
It went
watching
from
here?
it went from like 0 to 15 in a matter of,
Yeah, yeah.
like within a minute, and yeah.
And yeah, the whole thing about Marty's dad George there being the voyeur too.
Hmm.
It's like these are all things you put into a nice family summer blockbuster. Yeah,
Well, and again, that's where they have like the crumbs, because in the beginning, when Marty, before he actually travels back into time, they're
yeah.
talking about how she met him, and he was supposedly bird watching. They bring that out, but what he was doing is, he was, when that actually happens and Marty intervenes and saves his dad's life and pushes him out of the way, he was actually, he was being a pervert. I mean, he was watching Lorraine, get undressed is what he was doing. So, and then Marty's just like, oh, he's a peeping Tom. But it's all
There
these
you
little
go.
things that creep up during the film, but it all works though, because it's like a chain. It just links to one area, links to the next, to the next, to the next.
No, it's funny because you see they do these contrasts with the 50s and the 80s, but there are a lot of parallels between the 50s and the 80s too. So that's why the joke about Ronald Reagan being president worked so well, because Reagan
Right.
was president in the 80s, and but Christopher Lloyd's character Doc Emmett or Doc Brown, when he says, well, if you're from the future, then who's the president in 1985? And he says, oh, it's easy, Ronald Reagan or whatever.
He's
Oh,
like,
the,
the
you're
actor.
telling me the movie, which
But
apparently the real life Reagan thought was hilarious when he saw the movie.
yeah, in fact, they said that when he watched it, I guess he went back and he paused, and then
Played it
he
again.
played it again and everything.
Yeah,
I thought that
but
was
yeah, but it's then I started thinking, well, 30 years in the future, which was 2015, right? Because everybody made a big deal.
yeah.
What? Everybody made a big
No,
deal when what?
you just brought up an integral part. I mean, with that, Ross, it was like, wow, because he's like, look me up, and because he said he was going ahead when this whole thing with the time machine. Yes,
Right.
folks, a little bit to the plot. We're not going to do the plot. Everybody knows the plot. But
Hmm.
when Doc Brown is going to go ahead because he's tested with Einstein, and Einstein, came back. Einstein is all right, and
The
that's another
dog,
thing too.
Einstein, the dog. Yeah,
The
not
dog,
Einstein, the scientist. Yeah,
not the scientist. But when they did it with the test audience, the audience kind of cringed with that, because they were, you didn't know what was going to happen to poor Einstein,
right.
and that
Yeah.
was the
Well, they
one.
didn't tell him it was a comedy going in. Yeah.
Right. So they
Yeah.
were a little fearful about that. But it all turned out okay. But before he's about ready to go, into the future, and he's getting everything together, he says he's going to go 25 years, ahead. And, at 25 years, oh my God, that seems like so far away. And you know what? That was 2010.
Was
That
it
was like,
25 or 30? 30 years in the future, right?
no, he says 25.
Does
At
he?
one, he says 25 at one point. Yeah. Now maybe
Okay.
he does say 30 as well, but at one point it was 25. But even
Mm.
still, with that, 30 years into the future is 2015. 25 is 2010. It's like that's 12 years ago or 7 years ago. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
come and gone. It's kind of crazy when you think about it.
So I'm watching it and I'm thinking, well, okay, so look at this enormous, have all these differences between the 50s and the 80s in 30 years. And I'm thinking, well, what about like, 30 years ago? Yeah, how are things different 30 years ago than they are now?
Right.
Things are basically the same, but that's not true. I mean, if you really think about all the, really the cell phones taking off and the internet and everything else. I mean, these things were in existence before that, but they really took off in the 90s, and I guess things are different. You know,
I would say, but I think to your point, I think there's more of a difference between
nobody has phones anymore. You know, it's all
right.
cell phones.
But I think there's more of a difference between 1985 and 1955 than there is
Mm,
with 2000 and 15 and 1985. And it's just
mm,
it's so weird though to think about it, because to me, when we were watching this movie 30 years ago, seemed like, oh my god, that was such a long time ago. And
mm.
then now watching this film, and it's the reality is it's 30 years ago. It's like, wow, that doesn't seem that long ago, because it's like all the memories of everything that happened with that. It just it's just very bizarre. And it's the
Well,
same
now.
time frame.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm getting screwed up with the time frame now. Are we talking about 30 years from the film, or are we talking about how far the film is from now? Because it's certainly more than 30 years ago that this was out now.
Well, both really. I
Yeah,
mean, it's just 30 years ago to
yeah.
me doesn't seem that long ago. It was
It
what?
doesn't seem that long ago. There's always a movie that that comes up, and I see the date, and it's like, oh my god, I thought this was just out. I was going to make a point to see this movie, and it's now 30 years old. Now a
Right.
30-year-old movie.
It just
Oops.
I don't know. It's so bizarre
Mm.
when you're dealing with the whole, everything
Yeah.
with time and everything. That's why it's a lot of fun to talk about with in regards to that, because it's almost like a paradox. And then of course they deal with the the Doc Brown is saying about, as far as being the he's almost like the temporal police in Star Trek. He's like, you can't disrupt the timeline.
Yeah.
You can't interfere with everything, because it's gonna have an impact. So
Right.
with that said, the other thing I didn't share, which I wanted to, is we're saying about all roads leading to Star Trek. My goodness, in regards to the Klingon commander from Star Trek 3: The Search for Spock, Christopher
Oh yeah.
Lloyd. The movie was made 2 years prior to that, in 1983,
Mhm.
and Doc Brown, Chris Lloyd, and
Yeah.
he's excellent in this movie, and the chemistry between him and Michael J. Fox. I mean,
Mhm.
it's done very well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of
It-
a career defining performance for
yeah,
him. And he was very big in the 80s, Christopher Lloyd. He was he's a character actor though. He was in everything, but he wasn't, you might recognize his face, but you might not have known who he was until Back to the Future. Then everybody kind of knew his
right.
name, I think. And
Well,
and
and you remember him from the 70s in Taxi,
Taxi, yeah, he was what was he,
Reverend
Reverend Jim or what
Reverend
have you?
Jim.
Yeah, yeah, sure. And he was in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He was one of the people
Right,
in the
that's right.
asylum.
I
Yeah,
forgot about that. That's right, Ross.
yeah.
Um, Claudia is commenting. She said, I thought the time change happened at least in the 70s. I remember one morning suddenly walking to school in the dark.
Oh yeah, well, I mean the time change has been around for a long time, but they shifted the time
Right.
change. It used to be a few weeks. Was it later or earlier? I can't remember. They had some cockamamie reason for it, like it was going to save
I think it was earlier, wasn't it, Ross?
because they shifted it both in the spring and in the fall. I don't know what it is, but I just know it annoyed me.
And what they just passed was, now we are switching it. We are
Oh, did
falling
they
back,
pass?
but we are going to go. Then we're going to spring ahead in the spring, and then
Right.
that's it. We're not going to be changing it again.
Did they pass it?
They did pass it. It happened this week.
So wait a minute. So are we going to be one of them was okay. Like if we're stuck in standard time, that's okay. But are we going to be permanently in
Daylight
daylight
time.
savings time?
Yeah.
That's supposed to like screw up your biological your circadian rhythms entirely. If we
Well,
were
there you
stuck in standard time, that's supposed to be like a healthy change, supposedly,
go. Well, there you
because your body resets every day with the sun. But now we're going to be permanently off and exhausted and uh,
go.
drain the swamp, Roy.
Oh boy. Easy, Ross. Easy, Ross.
I'll have my vengeance on Tuesday. I'm gonna have to check to see who passed this thing.
On that happy note, I want to welcome David to the show. David, thanks for joining. He's saying, "Hey guys, sorry I'm late. Don't worry." You probably wish you came in maybe a couple minutes later. Uh, Colleen is out there. Hey, Colleen. Colleen was actually part of the show
Yeah,
when we did. When we
she
did we did whatchamacallit, Plan 9 from Outer Space. Colleen is saying, I wonder which links got left out when the film turned into a musical.
They made it into a musical, yeah.
Yeah, we didn't even Colleen, that's something you and I would really enjoy. Colleen and I love to sing.
Okay.
Uh,
You're being sarcastic.
she was my counterpart in Plan 9 from Outer Space. No, she did a good job.
And I was going to say about the most obvious road to Star Trek was there was a direct mention of Vulcan in the movie.
Yep,
at least.
exactly.
Who knows? They may have said something else. I don't know.
No, that was very direct, and then also, of course, Star Wars with
Darth Vader, right? Now, Christopher Lloyd, they had a lot of other people that they were considering for the part. Also, he got this based on his performance in The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai, across the 8th dimension or whatever it is. You all know the movie.
Yep.
But John Lithgow was another one who was in consideration for the film.
I could totally see him in that role.
I could see John Lithgow doing that part.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep. Another one that there were a lot of people that came up, but another name that was unsurprising to me was Jeff Goldblum, but I think he would have been completely wrong for the part.
Yeah.
Except for the fact that he was like kind of their all-purpose science guy back then. Whenever you needed somebody who was quirky scientist, you always got Jeff Goldblum. He would have played it entirely differently. He couldn't have been over the top. You know.
Trivia question: what was his first movie?
Jeff Goldblum?
Yeah.
Was it? I know what it is. The Charles Bronson movie. What the hell's Charles Bronson? It's he made like 75 of them.
Death Wish.
Death Wish. Was that it?
No.
What is it, Roy?
Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
No, that was after.
Was it?
Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah. I don't think he had a speech. I don't think he had any lines in Death Wish. He was one of the thugs in Death Wish.
Oh, okay.
But Invasion of the Body Snatchers, of course.
That was probably what I probably should have said is his like first major part.
It was probably his first major part.
Yeah,
although he was in The Sentinel also, but he only had one or two scenes. I think he played the director within the film, and I think that was before Body Snatchers or right around that time.
Yeah, because that was 78 Body Snatchers, another 44-year-old movie. Crazy.
Yeah, it was a good remake. I'm not usually real fond of remakes, but that was a pretty good one.
No, that was.
Yeah, but he was always, he's the Fly. He was always the quirky, science guy for a long time. If you couldn't get Bob Balaban, you got Jeff Goldblum.
Brundlefly.
Yeah, right. And now Eric Stoltz was in the Fly sequel.
Yep.
And apparently his name was Martin in the Fly.
Yeah, so
instead of Marty McFly, he got to be Martin the Fly.
Martin the Fly. Colin is saying in 1981, leaving school, the year 2000 seemed even an eternity away.
Yeah, it did. It really did.
Now it's 22 years ago. Martin
we
saying
still have flying cars. Yeah. I remember thinking that when I was in high school. It's like, wow, we're going to be alive to like if we live our lifespan, we're going to be alive to mid-century. Yeah, we're going to be in the 21st century.
Yeah.
What's that about driverless cars?
Yeah, Colin is saying driverless ordinary cars is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it's bad enough when there are people behind the wheel. Now we're going to do it with no people. Yeah.
Buckaroo
Banzai. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and the Hague is saying it was earlier. Bush moved it later. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
I knew there was something.
And Linda's saying no more time change. How progressive. Linda said.
Yeah. But they're doing it at the wrong time. We're permanently off anyway. It's true. We got to get back in touch with our agrarian roots and just rise with the sun.
And Don is saying Banzai creator Earl Mac Ruth wrote a sequel novel last year.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, it seemed like the kind of film where they could have done a mess of sequels for it. It was, what about Annie Hall?
I think he was guessing about
Woody Allen. Oh, yeah, because Jeff Goldblum turns up in Annie Hall too, right? Yeah.
Oh, and Mary Beth was guessing, saying was it Buckaroo?
Oh, I see. We're going through the
I'm going through the
Goldblum things. Yeah,
I'm getting caught up.
Yeah, he was around a little earlier than we think.
Good Star Trek reference, Jeff. There's no time to argue about time. We don't have the time. Deanna at first contact. That was a funny scene with Marina Sirtis as she was drunk. That was really good. Or, acting as she was drunk. So, yeah. See, always leads to Star Trek for us.
So it's funny to think, I forgot to mention too, this whole thing with Michael J. Fox and how they think the producer of Family Ties didn't give him the script, and how he almost didn't do the movie, how this could have turned out to be like a Tom Selleck situation where he wasn't Indiana Jones, because originally he was going to be Indiana Jones, but he couldn't do it because he's tied into Magnum. So Harrison Ford got the part. And it was kind of like that with Michael J. Fox. I mean, it could have been Eric Stoltz in Back to the Future, and Michael J. Fox would have probably been forgotten after Family Ties, would have been remembered for Family Ties.
Right. That's
instead
true.
of having that success that he enjoyed. Yeah.
It's crazy how it all works out.
Yeah.
And David is saying, wasn't he in a series called Gumshoes?
I know he was in a series called 10 Speed and Brown Shoe with Ben Vereen. Yeah. So I don't know if that's the same or not. Yeah.
That was after, though, I think. That was not before Body Snatchers, if I remember correctly.
Oh, yeah. I don't maybe it was after. I don't know.
Think
I recall watching it, though.
I think it was early 80s. 10 Speed and Brown Shoe, I think.
Yeah, the Hague would know.
Yeah,
because we talked about that before.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody can Google it. Yeah.
Randy Lee said Death Wish 1974. So, yeah. There you go. You got it, Ross. I was talking about a more definitive.
Oh, okay. All right. There's always a way out, Roy.
There's always a way out. You can spin anything. I've
Roy,
learned that from the best.
Yeah, it's Roy's Kabayashi Maru.
But yeah. Oh, actually, let me just share some more of the photos. We were going through the cast and everything. So
yeah,
let me get back there. Hold on 1 second. There we go. I jumped ahead. Here we go. Yeah, and then Crispin
Thompson.
Yeah.
And then also Howard the Duck. Then, yeah.
Did you see that movie?
Howard the Duck?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say I did see that movie.
I had no desire to see that.
I saw it at the Boyd. Well, I had no real desire to see it either. But it was George Lucas, and it was summer, and I was young and in love.
Is that what it was, Ross?
No, not really. I went to see it, and I said it couldn't be as bad as everybody's saying. And you know what? It was as bad as everybody's saying.
I had no desire to see that.
Saw it at the Boyd Theater in Bethlehem.
Wow.
Which was that was my choice theater for seeing that kind of movie.
Oh, was it really?
Well, with the sound and the effects and everything. Yeah, the Boyd was my favorite.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Now they tore it down, so we get nothing.
Yeah, everything part of the past.
Yeah.
It's like the Easton Eric that's gone. That's where we saw these movies. I mean, it was.
Yeah, I mean, it was a serviceable theater. It has a lot of nostalgic value because we saw a lot of good movies there. It wasn't a movie palace, but
no,
it wasn't quite the multiplexes we get now, where the theaters are so small.
No, I mean it was literally two theaters. It was Eric 1, which was the small one, and then Eric 2 was the larger one.
Right.
And the film would always break, or they'd always have problems. You'd always have to be running back.
Don't you miss that when the film would melt in the projector, or they'd show it out of sequence? Yeah, the good times.
Yeah. It's like we can't hear
sound.
Don is saying he might have seen it at the Boyd Theater when he was visiting his grandparents.
Oh, okay. So we might have been the same audience for Howard the Duck.
Yeah, there you go. Wow. And the Hague is saying there's not one theater in Schuylkill County anymore where I live. Wow.
That's crazy. Really?
Now
he's got that great drive-in though.
Yeah. So that's absolutely. Mm-hmm. Claudia Wells. Now she played Marty's girlfriend Jennifer, and interesting too with her. What happened was they wanted to have her, and then what happened was I guess she wasn't going to be available, and then they had cast another actress, and when that actress was cast against Eric Stoltz. Eric Stoltz is probably about 6 feet tall, very much taller than Michael J. Fox, who's about, I think he's like 5'4.5".
Mhm.
So what happened was when they actually did get Marty McFly to be Michael J. Fox, the actress that they had was a lot taller than him. So what happened was they wanted to recast the role, and then they were able to get Claudia Wells back,
Mhm.
and she was in it. Unfortunately, when it came to doing the sequels for 2 and 3, they recasted her, and I believe it was due to, I think her mom was having some health issues at the time.
Yeah, yeah. Which I'm sorry her mom was
Yeah.
sick, but it makes me feel better that to know that there was a personal reason,
Right.
and she wasn't just like they didn't like her and decided to recast it with a better known actress or something. Because it wasn't Elizabeth Shue who took over then.
It was Elizabeth Shue, and it's funny if you look at them both side by side. I mean, they look very similar, but you also did know that it was a different actress, and then there was a lot of talk about the role being recast, and it's a shame. And I have to say, Claudia Wells, if you go on Facebook, you'll see that she's out there, and she does the tours, and she's at convention signings, and ironically enough, and I did not know this, she was actually in Phillipsburg. She was at the mall. Actually, it was not the mall. There was a restaurant that just opened up, and it was called, I think it's called Mountainside Dudes, and it's right where the I can't think of it. It was the it was like a wings place or a restaurant, another restaurant, Jiffy Lube restaurant was at, and they took the place, and they actually had her, and they also had the actor that plays the mayor, and they
Oh,
came
yeah,
out.
Goldie, Mayor Goldie.
Yeah, they
Oh,
both
really?
were there, and I did not know that she was going to be doing an appearance, and I
Huh.
was really bummed because I mean it's like literally like from my house, it's literally like 4 miles up the road,
That's interesting.
and I missed out on it. And she, hung out with everybody, and just she does a lot of promotional tours, and then she also does stuff for charity. So she seems very, very nice. So I think that's really cool that she does does
And I
that.
hope things worked out well. Well, I hope her mom recovered. I don't know what the story was there, but it's not like she had a heck of a lot to do in the movie.
Right.
But I, you know how it is. It's like we were talking about the Munsters last week, where you get through one incarnation and they recast you. They toss you aside for somebody else when they do the movie or what have you. So,
hey, Paul Miller's out there. Paul, welcome to the show. I hope you're doing okay.
what's his favorite movie? It's on Buckaroo Bonsai. I bet Paul may have seen both of those movies with me. Oh boy.
Oh boy. All the stuff from the past.
Sorry, Paul. Hey, Paul, let's go see Howard the Duck.
Colin is saying, just been having a quick search on the good site here with all that stuff for Back to the Future. Thanks for sharing.
BackToTheFuture.com. Okay.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So
then you got Strickland.
Yeah, now he's done a lot of stuff. He's still going, and he's 91 years old. Yeah.
Has this guy ever looked any different?
No.
It's just like Marty says in the film. Did he ever have hair?
Yeah.
I mean, but he, he always played the same part in every movie I've seen him in.
Same,
like from Serpico through I don't know, Top Gun, through how many things have we seen this guy in where he plays the same part?
And it's the power of being a character actor. He does it, and he does it well. It's just, he became an admiral in Top Gun.
Did they put him in the sequel? Was he in the sequel?
No, it was Ed Harris in the sequel.
Ed Harris, yeah. I mean, he would have been like in his late 80s at that point, or 90. He's like 91 now or something, isn't he, this guy?
Yeah, he's 91. I think he's, like I said, he's close to William Shatner's age. But
yeah. Who do you think would win in a fight?
William Shatner.
Only if he uses one of those Gorn mortars.
Dun, 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 dun.
If he cheats and improvises a Gorn mortar, Strickland is doomed.
Dun, 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 dun. Oh boy, yeah, William Shatner. He is going. I've got to give a shout out, and we'll do that later. But he's going to be in Ticonderoga in 2 weeks. So, folks, if you have not checked out the website, tickets are still available. William Shatner in person. So we'll cover that later. But anyway,
you have a slide for Billy Zane.
I don't. Billy Zane was in this movie. Yeah, and he did not have one line in this film. And Billy
No.
Zane, what film do you think I remember him from? And don't say if I don't know if Gwen is still out there. Gwen, I still have not watched Titanic, but I do know Billy
Yeah.
Zane is in Titanic and he's the heavy.
Yeah.
But yeah, but that's
Is it the Phantom? Which one
no,
did you? Is it really?
no. The first movie
Which one?
the first movie I saw Billy Zane in where he was actually the heavy was
Dead Calm.
Dead Calm
Dead
1988.
Calm. Oh, you saw Dead Calm.
Yeah,
All right. Yeah, yeah. George Miller. That was George Miller and Mad Max fame. That was actually a pretty decent thriller.
it was. I saw that
Yeah.
at the Budco back in the day.
And then he was creepy as hell. And then because I thought he was acting, and then he played that part in everything he's been in since
Yeah.
then.
He was actually a chiller a couple of
Was he
years
really?
ago.
Billy Zane was?
Yeah. I didn't
Wow.
go over on, but I saw him there. Yep.
Okay.
But yeah, Don saying Dead Calm, great film. Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw that movie on a date.
Yeah, I didn't know that really got that kind of circulation. So good. I'm glad people have seen it.
Yeah, that was a really good film, and that was Nicole Kidman. That was
Yeah.
I think she was 23 when that film, and her husband in that movie was Sam Neill.
Sam Neill, right?
Yeah,
They had all the Australian actors.
Phantom wasn't
as bad as he was expecting. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree, but it wasn't as good as I was expecting either. Because I don't know. There are movies that get dismissed, and sometimes I enjoy them, especially from that era. And I don't know what my point is. It wasn't as bad. My favorite line is "No smoking in the Skull Cave."
Oh, speaking of lines,
Demon Knight.
I'm glad you brought that up, Ross. That was a good lead in with that. And actually, before I go to that, just here's a couple more movie moments. Again, the DeLorean, super cool car. I mean, if you're gonna make a time machine, it's like as Doc says, you're gonna make it with like class. I mean,
who plays the elder Phantom in the film? Patrick McGowan.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, so he plays kind of like the Anthony Hopkins is the elder Zorro to Antonio Banderas is the younger Zorro. Same thing in the Phantom.
So you're referring to Patrick McGowan from
The Prisoner.
The Prisoner fame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead. Tell me more about the DeLorean. I didn't mean to step on your.
No,
I'm a little slow to follow up on things.
Yeah, no, it's all good. No, and speaking of Patrick McGowan, I've been actually watching Columbo episodes, and he did I think in the original ones, he did at least 2, and then they brought him back when they did the later ones in the 80s or the 90s. And such a brilliant actor. And he won an Emmy for his performance. It was By Dawn's Early Light. And I know Vince is out there. He's a huge Columbo fan. It was just an excellent performance. But in regards to lines, I thought there were 3 lines that really resonated in this film. And one of them, which is really true, and it's true about anything, if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything. I mean, and it was kind of like the line that Marty winds up telling his dad, and then his dad makes that comment when he's back in the present. And I thought that was kind of cool. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing too, which we didn't talk about, which actually we'll come to that. So I'll save that line because you'll cover that. And then the other line, which is the line that I probably use all the time, and I joke with Vince all the time, is roads where we're going, we don't need roads. And that's like the last line in the film. But it was just always, I just thought that was fun.
Yeah. It's good.
My last comment is, come on, Ross, how many times have you driven your car when you were driving stick and then you pretended you were driving the DeLorean? You did it at least once.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right.
I shouldn't even talk about my driving with the stick, but yeah, I don't know. But talking about the flying car, what have you? What's really interesting about one of the things that's really interesting about this movie is that for it being a summer blockbuster and a sci-fi blockbuster to boot, is that so few of the it has set pieces, but so few of the set pieces really involve the kind of special effects that were driving films like The Empire Strikes Back or what have you. I mean, you had 2 time travel sequences basically, And in between, the other things were just standard things with an improvised skateboard taken off the bottom of some kid's soapbox.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something else, but none of them were, and yet they were compelling. You know what I mean? It's like it kept your interest, but it didn't have all the high tech gadgetry.
But it worked.
And it worked. And in fact, they had to make this thing at such a lightning pace, especially since Stoltz dropped out, that by the end of the film, they were racing through post production to get they were working on the effects right up until they had to let go of the movie. And in fact, the effects artists were kind of disappointed with some of the effects in the movie, but it's a good example of how you don't need everything to be realistic,
right?
To work. I know that the effects supervisor on the film, who was what's his name, Rollins, is it Ken Rollins? What was his name? Ralston, because he was at ILM, and they were working on Cocoon and the Goonies at the same time. They were all like back to back, like trying to rush and get this thing done. He was not happy with how Marty's hands were fading out when he was playing at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance and the Johnny Be Good sequence and so forth. But do we care? No, we understand what you're suggesting, and we're wrapped up in the story at that point. So I'm glad that nobody went back, to my knowledge. Maybe they did on some special edition set, but I'm glad nobody went back and touched up the effects, because don't bother.
Right. I haven't heard that they've done that, and I'm hoping that they don't, because again, this is another example. Just leave well enough alone.
Oh, are they going to do it? Did you say that?
No, I didn't hear anything about that. But
yeah.
But now that you've sparked the
I know.
It's going to make its way. It'll get to the studio execs. The show's going to go viral, Ross. Yeah. And then what's going to happen is it's going to make its way to the studio, and then you've now planted the seed.
I know now how I unwittingly, it's like I changed the future.
You have altered the future, Ross. You have altered the future of Back to the Future.
Yeah, and then the Terminators will start showing up. We got to take out Ross because he's going to change Back to the Future.
Paul's got your back. Back to the future.
Again.
Just what I'm going to have to do is, or what I should have done was, I should have superimposed Ross on this photo right here of playing the guitar. Ross is going to be disappearing now.
There you go.
Oh shoot, you gotta laugh. Oh boy, I'm not even gonna put that in there. I'm not gonna put that comment up, Matt.
I'll have to look after the show.
Hey Allie, thanks for joining us.
Hi.
It's okay. Don't worry about being late.
You didn't miss anything.
It's okay, Allie. You can go back to the future, and then you can catch it all over again in reruns.
You flashed up the Johnny Be Good scene there, and that was one of those things where when they went back and watched the film, Zemeckis was thinking maybe he would chop it out or chop it up at least, because it was kind of it was not necessary to the narrative. In fact, that was the point in the movie where we'd already had the climactic showdown with Biff and everything, and you wanted to get on with the film. But it turned out the audience at the test screenings, they were just enthralled at that point in the movie, and so he left it in. And it's just it reminded me also of how in Young Frankenstein, Mel Brooks was totally against the putting on the Ritz number.
Right.
And Gene Wilder kept pushing for it. And they realized when the movie came out that he was totally right, that the scene totally worked. And the same thing with this, with him hot dogging, going from the Chuck Berry to the heavy metal guitar and the references to all the shredding guitarists that they had in the 80s.
Right. It was a nod to all those performers, and they did it. It was one thing after the other, and it really worked with that.
And Hendrix,
he kicks the speaker at one point.
Well,
right?
Yeah, well, yeah, they all had their thing, and he plays on his back, like the guy from AC/DC, and it's not really my stuff, but I knew all these guys, from my sister anyway. She
But I
was
thought
into, she was into that stuff. Yeah.
I thought it was cool the way they did the whole setup with Marvin Berry. He's on the phone. He goes, it's your cousin, Marvin Berry, and he's like, Chuck, listen to this. This is what you've been listen to.
Yeah.
Looking for. I mean, it was little connections like that really worked well.
Mm.
Randy's saying, if Back to the Future was changed, would we even know? Whoa, totally 80s time paradox.
And now, yeah, or the Omega Man.
Yeah, Jeff Rubble's always got your back with that, Ross.
Thanks, Jeff. The Omega Man versus the Terminators.
Yeah, there you go. Anyway.
Well, Walk This Way was stupid, but it still worked. It still worked. I love that.
Yeah, it did. And then Christian saying, Johnny Be Good is in my repertoire. My version is I play the rhythm part as Hendrix and the lead is Chuck Berry. There you go. Yeah. But what about we really did talk about the director though, Robert Zemeckis.
Yeah, Zemeckis. Yeah, and from what I gathered, Michael Fox didn't really play guitar. I mean, not that he would like in that manner, but at all. I mean, he had to be taught how to kind of mime.
And he didn't sing either. He didn't sing that song.
Right, they dubbed him. Right,
they dubbed him. That's
yeah.
So, but he pulled it off.
Zemeckis, we all know, I think Zemeckis by now. Romancing the Stone was his big breakout. Then this one solidified him
a year later.
Yeah. And then he started doing like Spielbergian type films, like Who Framed Roger Rabbit was one of his big hits. But then he got into more, regular movies later on, like Forrest Gump, which was a big film, and Castaway, usually with Tom Hanks. But then he got into that whole motion capture thing. Do you remember when he was doing all these animated films like Polar Express and Beowulf? And at some point during the making of Beowulf, he said that all of his future films were going to be motion capture. And thank goodness he backed off of that, because those were creepy, uncanny films that I didn't like.
Yeah, I didn't see those. I do remember those. And Forrest Gump, I think that came out in 93, 94. And then what was the other movie? Oh, Castaway. I think that was like right around that same time. Wasn't it like a year later or so? Yeah.
Forrest Gump, you got him, it was Best Picture, and it got him a Best Director award. So that was his...
not too shabby.
Not too shabby, yeah. Castaway, I enjoyed quite a bit. Just the conceit of having Tom Hanks and a beard on a desert island for 2 hours.
That movie always struck me really sad though, especially the end.
Oh, it is a sad movie. Yeah.
It was just, he was lost at sea for like 4 years, I think. And,
yeah. But also very entertaining. Yeah.
Matt's saying, yeah, Ross, I thought Omega Man would have been your feel-good movie leaving the theater.
There you go. Pinocchio. Yeah, he worked on a Pinocchio, which I have not seen. Yeah.
And then, of course, as we go to the music.
Oh, we already did the music? Do we exhaust our discussion? That's fine. That's enough for me.
Yeah.
This is yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm looking at the time.
Oh, what time is it?
It's 9:20. We
Wow, right.
I know.
You started late too.
Yeah, like 5 minutes.
Well, I mean,
I started late. What?
What? Yeah, what? I mean, I'm in the chair. What?
What? Wow.
I'm in the chair. There's nothing to discuss. We go through the slides and start it.
We're welcoming everybody.
We'll talk about this after the show.
We'll have a discussion later at midnight. Anyway, we're gonna heading into the music though.
Alan Silvestri was a session musician from, I think, Teaneck, New Jersey. But he decided,
I was born in Teaneck, New Jersey.
You and Alan Silvestri, I know.
And my dad.
And your dad, too. You guys could have had a trio. Yeah. But he wanted to be a film musician. He had no idea, what the first thing about, what he was going to do when he got there. But he struck out for California. And yet he was a drummer with his high school band. So, he could play drums. He picked up the guitar. He was a session guitarist. Somebody came up to him at a point and said they wanted to write the score for their movie in 1972. Do you know what this movie is? Did you look this up?
I didn't. Score for a movie 1972. Give me a quick hint.
Do I have to give you a hint?
Yeah.
Well, we just talked about it a couple of weeks ago in some context. What did we talk about it? Sometime in the last few weeks, we mentioned the movie, totally by coincidence.
The Godfather.
No, nothing that big. It was the Doberman Gang.
Oh, okay.
They approached him to write the music for the Doberman Gang. So I guess that was his first film score was the Doberman Gang. And he taught himself basically, the construction of a film score by reading a book by Earl Hagen about how he did it. And Earl Hagen, we would know as largely a television composer. He did movies too, but he did like Andy Griffith's Show. He did the theme, the Dick Van Dyke Show, That Girl, I Spy, Mod Squad. Earl Hagen did a lot of stuff, but apparently Alan Silvestri taught himself from Earl Hagen's book on how to score a motion picture. And then he became kind of the who would think, two mentions of the Doberman Gang, which is a movie nobody thought of for the last 50 years. And in the last 2 or 3 weeks, we mentioned it a couple of times.
We're just gonna have to do the movie.
We're gonna have to do it. That's a sign, right?
It's a sign.
Yeah. So he kind of became the house composer for Chips, the television series.
Yep.
He did most of the scores for the series Chips, and then he met not Alan Silvestri. He met Zemeckis when he was doing Romancing the Stone. He was hired, and since he was on Zemeckis's coattails when that became a big hit, he kept him for Back to the Future. And Zemeckis said, "Look," he says, "we got to do," because Spielberg hated the music for Romancing the Stone because he liked John Williams. So Zemeckis said to Alan Silvestri, he says, "Look, you've got to go big for this one. You got to go big." so his total model was the Spielberg blockbuster, those fanfares and everything. He's trying to do John Williams for the score, and it's still my favorite Silvestri score. It's very interesting though, because unlike Star Wars, where you get you get Star Wars and you got the big, fanfare and the crawl at the beginning, and how these movies work, or Superman with the
those are epic.
Epic. This one, they throw you totally off balance. It starts with the ticking clocks and they fade in, and there's no music at all for the opening credits. And then you get Huey Lewis. And you don't get any orchestral music until you're introduced to the DeLorean in the parking lot of the mall there. And then you get the big orchestral score finally. So I think I've said, and the soundtrack album was so frustrating because I loved the score when I saw the movie, and I really wanted the orchestral score. And you go to listening booth or what have you, and the LP, you pick it up and it's all Huey Lewis and all the popular stuff that was in the movie, and they had 2 little orchestral cuts in there.
So Silvestri really didn't get there was hardly anything.
Anything for decades.
Wow.
For decades. They didn't come out with a CD of his score until 2009. I bought it. So you couldn't get Back to the Future. You couldn't get the orchestral score until 2009. I don't have it to hold up in front of you because I don't know how I file my film music. I didn't have time to look for it. Like the classical is all alphabetical, but the film stuff, it's like, okay, John Williams is at the top. Right. And now here's Eric Wolfgang Korngold. And I go by composer. So I don't know where Silvestri ranks.
That's a library, Ross.
Yeah, I'll have to look for it. So Eddie Van Halen, Van Halen didn't want to give any rights for their music for the movie, but Eddie Van Halen said, "Sure, you can. I'll do some stuff for you, and you can use it, in the film." So that cassette tape that he uses when he appears as Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan was Eddie Van Halen. Chuck Berry didn't want to give the rights for Johnny Be Good, and he kept holding out, and until the day before shooting. And finally, they gave him $50,000 for it. So good for Chuck. But, all those early guys always got screwed. It's not like now where so few musicians get any, make any real money. But you know how it is. Like back then, you know, they had to tour constant, go from club to club constantly to make rent. You know.
Well, that's the frustrating part. You know, you don't make money off of these things, and then suddenly
Yeah.
something happens, and you are going to have that type of attention. And you know what? They needed to pay him, and
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
it's very sad that that's the way of the land, unfortunately. And so many people lose out on that, and you know, talented people.
Mhm.
And I totally get it.
And you guys already mentioned the stage musical, which debuted in February 2022
Yeah,
at the
Colin.
Manchester Opera House in the UK, and it got you know, got pretty good reviews. I don't know anything about it other than the fact that Zemeckis and Gale wrote they used their you know, they adapted it, and Silvestri did the music alongside of Glenn Ballard, who apparently is some rock producer. So I don't know how what the score's like. He worked with Alanis Morissette and Michael Jackson and people like that. So I assume that it would have a lot of the Silvestri score in it, but I wonder if there's songs in there that are more poppy. You know,
Mm,
I don't know anything about it, so
well,
I
there you
shouldn't
go.
tell tales out of school. And yeah, so he worked closely with Zemeckis and scored all of his movies after that, or a lot of them. And he also did Predator, The Abyss, Lilo and Stitch, Night at the Museum, and he really had a lucky break with the Avengers, because that kind of has lifted him, elevated him now to a much, you know, he was always a steady working composer, but I think now he's probably making some real money now that he's part of the Marvel universe.
Yeah.
Like everybody else, he's riding the Marvel gravy train now. So,
And I love the fact that Huey Lewis in the News. I loved Huey Lewis in the News. I mean, they
uh,
were a favorite of mine back in the '80s,
oh,
and
well, it totally makes it feel like the '80s. And the
yeah,
song "Power of Love" was nominated for best song, um, and he has a cameo in the film. Huey, you know.
and that was the other thing. That was the other line I was going to put out there, and then I held off on it. It's when Huey's actually playing a judge for the talent show, and Marty's trying to get his band to be in it, and he wants to get chosen. And then the irony is the music that they're playing for the audition is the Power of Love. And when Huey Lewis cuts him off, it's that he goes, "Thank you, fellas. I'm afraid you're too darn loud," you know. And it was just kind of an irony because
Yeah.
in regards to that. But I
Oh, the irony.
were you a Huey fan?
It was the '80s, you know. It's like if it was playing in the background and I was happy, I was good with it.
Yeah,
I
there you
can't say that I was a fan, but you know, if my life was if I was feeling good, then it was fine.
go.
I
Gotcha.
like being oblivious in the '80s. I still like being oblivious, but people don't let me be oblivious. They have to keep me angry all the time. Why can't it be like the '80s?
4
I wasn't
decades
as
ago.
angry. Yeah.
Don't make me angry, Mr. McGee. You wouldn't like me if I'm angry. Da-na-na-na-na. Interesting enough, whatchamacallit, The Incredible Hulk just celebrated 45th anniversary. Very
Mm,
first pilot episode was released in 1977. It was just this week.
mm.
So yeah, cheers to that.
Cheers.
Cheers. So anyway, we're going to start winding down, folks. But I just want to introduce a new segment we're going to be doing on the show, and it's called "That's the Way It Was." And this is a nod to legendary news reporter Walter Cronkite, because he, at the end of every when he would do the evening news for CBS, he would say, "That's the way it is." So we're taking it to a different direction. So it's just kind of a nod in regards to that, and we'll do this at the end of each show. And that's the way it was. And for this movie premiered on July 3rd, 1985. So just in retrospect of that, that was the premiere date of Back to the Future. So literally 37 years ago. And the hit song, or the hit music in the US at the top of the charts, was Susudio. If you remember Phil Collins singing that, somewhere I've actually got the video to that when it was on MTV. And then for the UK, for our UK viewers out there, Sister Sledge was the #1 song with Frankie. So second movie that was holding the box office was Cocoon. And this film was at the top of the movie charts for box office for 1985. So anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is pretty impressive. So excellent.
Again, concluding your decade of Spielberg kind of blockbusters is like anytime he had a film, with the exception, I think, of like 1941. I mean, they were always the top grossing film of the year. Same thing with the Star Wars movies and
Yeah.
Indiana Jones. You just knew, all right, that's going to be the top film. I give up for 10 years.
And that's it.
That's it.
Brennan is saying now Cocoon's out.
Wow, is Cocoon out of print? That means it's going to turn up on the Criterion Collection.
Yeah, there you go.
That always happens. It's like, oh,
So-
where's my $6 DVD of that Western I had? Oh, it's on the Criterion Collection now for $50. Yeah.
Oh, really? Do you have that or not?
No.
Whoops, I
no.
lost you.
No, I was just making a witticism about all these. I'd always pick up all these Westerns for, under $10, and then they turn up on Criterion. I mean, they do a terrific job with the restorations and with all the bonus features and everything. But, it's an investment.
Yeah.
So
I know Don, because Don has talked about that, the Criterion Collection. They have a lot of good stuff out there.
Oh yeah, they have great stuff. But whenever
Hagues.
anything goes out of print, it's going to be on Criterion. That's
The Hague is saying the Criterion Collection or How to Make a Movie cost $100.
yeah, they're collecting. Yeah.
Oh, and Don's saying Criterions are 50% off at Barnes & Noble this
There
month.
you
Thanks
go.
for sharing, Don. There you go.
50% off Cocoon. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I want to give a shout out. We'll go to the shout outs real quickly since we are kind of over on time. But shout out to Mike and Mary Beth. And Mary Beth is out there tonight for Sci-Fi Distilled. And they do movies and television shows of the 80s, 90s, and beyond. They are going to be back this Wednesday, November 9th at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Tune into them, and they will be discussing books that should be movies. And then eventually, I think they were saying that they're going to do movies that should be books. So check them out, and they are going to be doing that, and that will be this upcoming Wednesday. And next, I want to give a shout out to the Country Gate Players. Again, in Belvedere, New Jersey, and that's where we're just talking about what we just did with Plan 9 from Outer Space. So with Country Gate, on the books and what's coming up is going to be the Country Gate Players are doing a Christmas review. It's going to be songs and stories of the season from your favorite performers at Country Gate. It's going to be on the dates of Saturday, December 10th and 17th at 8 p.m. And then also Sunday, December 11th and 18th at 2 p.m. So again, you can enjoy the magic of the holidays at Country Gate and visit the website for information. You can either go to www.countrygate.org or you can visit also www.billscorrado.com for information. And then, of course, Country Gate is on Facebook as well. So definitely check it out. In regards to Captain Phil's Planet, Captain Phil is on WUSB 90.1 FM, Stony Brook, New York. And his schedule is on alternating Thursdays from 3 to 5 p.m. and then also on Friday nights from 9 to 11:30 p.m. Check out Captain Phil. Also, a quick shout out to Studio One Thrift featuring live broadcasts on Facebook. Owners Snow and Martha, they showcase their lineup for all seasons all year long. They have quality, stylish, affordable clothing for men and women. You can order directly online and also visit their website, which is www.studio1thrift.com. The merchandise is really excellent, folks. It's low costing. So if you have the opportunity and you are looking for clothing, definitely check it out. They've been putting a lot of effort into their business that they just started about 6 months ago. Next, I want to give a shout out to Ross. Can you let everybody know what you got going?
All right. These are the two shows I've got on WWFM, the Classical Network. Picture Perfect's the movie music show. And tomorrow night at 6 o'clock, The Shadows Are Lengthening. So it's all music from film noir. So I've got 4 scores from film noir, including The Big Sleep, Humphrey Bogart, and he plays Philip Marlowe. It's music by Max Steiner. I've got music from Chinatown, Jack Nicholson as Jake Gittes, and Jerry Goldsmith wrote the music. and music from Orson Welles' Touch of Evil. Henry Mancini is the composer. And finally, music from Double Indemnity, Billy Wilder's film with Fred MacMurray and Barbara Stanwyck. Those are the four films I'll be treating tomorrow night on Picture Perfect at 6 o'clock. And you're in luck Sunday night on The Lost Chord at 10 o'clock. The show is preempted. They're doing some special stuff at the station, some special programs. So you don't have to listen to me summarize what I'm doing on Sunday night. We can make up some time and move on to the next slide. But I will write about Picture Perfect tomorrow morning, more about the film noir on my Facebook page at Classic Ross Amico. And if you don't follow me yet, please do so. I write all kinds of stuff about movies and music on that page.
Very cool.
I will welcome you. Thanks, Roy.
Thanks, Ross. Yeah, just real quick, Mary Beth just posted too. She said, "Tell us which books should be movies and which great books made bad movies." So again, that's for their show.
You are tempting me to tune in on Wednesday. Damn you!
Con.
That's usually the night I watch the movies for this show. Is Wednesday night.
Now you're gonna go, Mary Beth.
I know it's a very interesting topic, though.
It is an interesting topic.
Yeah.
And yeah, real quick too, speaking about Mike and Mary Beth, because that's how we all became friends. And that's at the Star Trek Originally Series set tour. William Shatner is going to be there, folks. He's going to be there in 2 weeks. So you can go to, for information, I don't have a slide for this, but www.startrektour.com. And you can check out information. There's a whole listing about the different packages that they have offered there. And he's going to be there Saturday and Sunday, I believe. I can't keep everything straight. My brain is on overload. So correct me if I'm wrong, Mary Beth. And definitely check out the website in regards to that. Also, I want to give a shout out quick to my son, Ryan. He is going to be running in the New York City Marathon this Sunday. So very excited about that.
They make them run the night after they get an extra hour. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's okay. But the weather, though, is incredible, though. I mean, it's like, he's used to, he lives in Texas, and it's like 80 degrees up there, down there, I should say. But usually we have cooler weather here. So anyway,
good luck, Ryan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking of spring where you lose an hour. It's like, what, you're going to the marathon the day after everybody loses an hour.
Yeah, so
he gains an hour. Yeah, he'll run well.
Yeah, it's 26.2 miles, I think, too. It's crazy that there's like over 60,000 people running for that. So again, folks, just to remind everybody, if you have not already, I want to thank everybody. If you haven't already, please like the Facebook page. And then also, if you have not subscribed onto YouTube, please do so, as well as Twitter. There is no cost associated with it, and we really appreciate it. And Ross and I will be back on Friday, November 11th at 7:30 p.m. And we will be doing the Jerry Anderson movie, which was actually broadcast on NBC back in 1975, and it is called The Day After Tomorrow. So we will be discussing that, and in The Day After Tomorrow, actually Into Infinity, and it actually stars our friend of the show, Nick Tate, and along with Brian Blessed. So we will be covering that. And
alive?
Yeah, Gordon's alive. So that's going to be some fun, and again, it's going to be part of our time travel tribute. So we will be doing that. Also, a quick shout out, just trying to get everything in. Warren is going to be broadcasting on Sunday at 2 p.m. and he's going to be talking about the Space 1999 convention that's going to be taking place in Canada next year. So that will be 2 p.m. this Sunday. So you can actually go to the Facebook site, Destination Moonbase Alpha, for information on that. And I'll post a link on the show's page as well, to be able to tune in. So I think we pretty much have everything covered in regards to that. But yeah, we will be continuing that as well. And excellent movie, Ross. Great film. Love going back in just that time in our lives. It was just I don't know. I definitely missed the 80s a lot.
Yeah.
On many levels.
And the film still holds up, which is frustrating. Why don't they make a movie like that? It doesn't have to be that movie, but why can't you make a movie like that?
Yeah. It's just it's a different, no pun intended. It's
people would enjoy watching.
Yeah.
Oh, what a sellout. Yeah.
But Everybody, thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate it. We hope you have a nice week, a great weekend. Stay safe. And as we always like to say, any last words before I close out, Ross?
No, we've spoken enough. We have to get the time traveling DeLorean to go back to snip out a few minutes of the show.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you, folks. Take care and live long and prosper, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.